Dear listeners, we have a proposition for you. Imagine yourself taking a small box and you put 50 cents in it every day. By the end of the month, you'll have $15. By becoming a BAI buddy for 50 cents per day, or $15 a month, WBAI would be able to reduce on-air fund drive days from over 140 days to just 30 days per year. For 50 cents per day, you can ensure that regular programming is not going to be preempted for on-air fund drives. Go to WBAI.org to sign up or call at 516-620-3602.
Once again, this is WBAI New York, 99.5 FM, and WBAI.org on the web. Stay tuned for State of the Arts NYC with Savona Bailey-McClain coming up.
Good evening. This is State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. And tonight we have a very, very special program for you. We will share our coverage of the New York City Winter Jazz Fest and APAP's plenary session on transdisciplinary impacts. One of the highlights of the Winter Jazz Fest was the panel on gender and equality with legendary icon and social activist Angela Davis. The session kicked off with the Resistance Revival Chorus, who just committed this afternoon to coming to State of the Arts in February. So you'll get to hear this chorus that came out of the Women's March. And then we will have an inspiring conversation that we will hear that was already done earlier this week, moderated by noted jazz percussionist Terri Lyne Carrington. We will share an interview with Christina Soriano and Christina Hugenschmidt, who were invited to the APAP conference to share their collaboration on dance and neuroscience at Wake Forest University in North Carolina. They are working to help older adults with neuro-degenerative diseases and their quality of life. Excuse me, folks. And capping our lineup will be Jane Kallir, gallerist of St. Etienne Gallery. It's Galerie St. Etienne, and her gallery is at the Winter Antique Show, and it's going to feature Grandma Moses and works by Leonard Baskin. So we really have a great lineup for you. We're going to start with Jane first. Jane, are you there on the line?
I sure am.
How are you?
I'm good today. How are you?
I'm okay. I've been running around for the last 2 weeks.
Tell me about it. I know the feeling.
I've been hitting Winter Jazz Fest. I've been hitting Winter Antiques, Outsider Art Fair, Sotheby's. I've hit various many sessions at APAP. I've also been helping out with the Chamber Music of America. I've been helping out with Prototype with their fair. I also did American Dance Platform. So I have been running all over for the last 2 weeks.
Well, sounds like fun. I hope you've been having fun.
A little bit. I'll be resting tomorrow.
Good for you.
But I'm very excited about the Winter Antique Show. I was there yesterday for the press preview. I got to see a lot of interesting works. We had Michael D.S. Griffin on our show last week, Friday, to tell us kind of an overview of everything that we would be expecting. And then I saw your booth, and I saw the snow scenes. of Grandma Moses. So please tell our audience about the snow scenes by Grandma Moses.
Well, maybe I should start by telling them a little bit about who Grandma Moses was. To the extent that there are any boomers in your audience, they may remember her. But for a lot of people, they don't realize that Grandma Moses was probably the most famous American artist during the immediate post-war period, from about 1945 until her death in 1961 at the age of 101. So she was really the first fine art superstar. She would be on TV. She would be on Christmas cards. She would be in calendars. You could buy drapery fabric with her paintings, reproduced plates, all manner of stuff. And because she was so known for her holiday cards, people really, really loved her winter scenes more than any other. She was a landscape painter, so she painted, spring, summer, fall, and winter. But it was the winter that people really went for, which is kind of amusing to her. She lived in upstate New York.
Yes.
She didn't even much like the winter. She said, too damn cold. But her winter paintings are so full of joy, and they really celebrate both the beauty of the season and the holidays that we all celebrate at that time. And we are fortunate in our booth at the Winter Antiques Show to have about 15 paintings by Grandma Moses, and a good half of them are winter scenes depicting things like a blizzard, which she makes feel like a lot more fun than it really is.
Okay.
And sugaring off, which is a quaint custom. People still do it upstate and in New England in the late winter and early spring. You tap into the maple trees.
Correct.
And then as the sap starts to thaw, the maple sap comes into these little buckets, and then you boil it down and make maple syrup out of it. But back in Grandma Moses' days, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, they would have what you call sugaring parties, and all the people would gather, and the grown-ups would tap the trees and start boiling down the syrup right there outdoors, and the kids would run and play in the snow, and then the parents would drop the maple syrup down onto the snow where it would freeze into a kind of instant maple candy.
Well, it's no different than, like barn raising, those, rural traditions.
A lot of those things like quilting bees, which she also painted, barn raisings, exactly.
Yes, yeah. And what's interesting, because she really was a folk artist, and that terminology and the genre has, morphed over the decades. But I think what really resonated with a lot of people was that she was really showcasing their everyday life. So it was, sitting outside or putting the clothes on the line, or it was kids running around in the field and animals playing around. She was capturing their everyday life. I mean, our sort of urban lifestyle in the United States is not that old when you think about it.
No, and I think that it's important to recognize that she became popular precisely at a time when these traditions were starting to change and we were becoming more urban. And so this was her experience, but it wasn't necessarily everybody else's experience in the 1950s when people were starting to move out to the suburbs and we were building interstates and traveling more. And I think what's also really important is that there was something very reassuring about these paintings at a time when, look, we were in the early years of the Cold War.
Right.
People were facing the possibility of nuclear annihilation for the first time, and she seemed to offer a note of reassurance and to say, look, these are the enduring values of human life, of American life. spring will come, summer will follow spring, fall will follow summer, and then winter will come, and then it will be spring again. And there isn't that much to worry about.
Right, right. No, I mean, that's kind of, that's been a repeated sort of experience in the United States. And you're right, it started after World War II, just as the Cold War was beginning, where people wanted some sort of reassurance that what they sacrificed during the war really meant something. And, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I tell people all the time, like right now we're engaged in a lot of protests. People are calling them resistance. And I'm not saying that it's not needed or valued, but I also tell people, remind yourself why you're protesting, why you're resisting. You don't want to do it to the point where you forget what's really important and what you wish to hold on to. And I think that's what she was trying to say in her own way, that these are the lifestyles, these are the types of values, these are the landscapes that matter, and we need to remind ourselves why they're important and why we're preserving them or fighting for them.
I think that's absolutely true, and I would, not just second what you say, but also supplement it by saying that I think that a lot of us who are resisting today are resisting because we feel that these values have been betrayed. And I'll add something else to make that statement even stronger. My grandfather, Otto Kallir,
right,
was the art dealer who discovered Grandma Moses in 1940, and we gave her first show at the Galerie St. Etienne, and then shepherded her career ever since. Now, he was a Holocaust survivor. He had escaped from Nazi Austria just 2 years before that. He got out immediately after Hitler invaded in March 1938.
Wow.
He went first to Paris, and he just landed in the United States toward the end of 1939. So you have to imagine this guy, he's literally fresh off the boat. He doesn't speak English very well.
Okay.
This is maybe 6 months later. And he believes in America, I think, only the way someone who comes in as a refugee like that can believe in it.
Okay.
We're all a little jaded, but he really he went for the whole American dream
Kitten
thing.
and caboodle, yes.
Exactly. And he was looking around. He was a sophisticated European guy. He'd run a gallery in Vienna. He's looking at the art on 57th Street, which was then really the art center of New York, the only one. And he didn't like much of it. He thought it was very repetitive, similar to things that had been done in Europe 50 years ago, boring. And yet he really, really loved the United States as a beacon of freedom and democracy, which he saw being eliminated by Hitler. And he was looking for an art that reflected those values. And so when all the dealers turned down Grandma Moses because she was going to be 80 years old and they thought that she'd die and they'd never make any money off her, he said, this is a great artist. I don't care how old she is. I'm going to show her work. And then, of course, she surprised all of them, and she lived to be 101.
Yeah. I mean, but we have now a lot of artists who are over 100. We have Carmen Herrera. She's over 100. She should be, I think, this year 102 years old. We have a lot of other older artists who are very well known. I have to check on a couple of dates, but I think like Mark DeServo, he's up in age. He's been sculpting for quite some time. I saw Storm King during the fall as a birthday present to myself, and it was amazing. But yes, I think sometimes you have to give people a chance, and sometimes that fame doesn't come early in life. It comes much later when you've lived life, and then that way you can appreciate life much better. But I just want to thank you so much, Jane, for joining us. I mean, this is really exciting. You have so many fairs going on at the same time. Outsider Art, You have New York Ceramics and Glass. You have Winter Antique. You have this weekend Sotheby's auctioning off, I think it's close to 1,000 lots. You had Christie, who also sold various lots earlier this week. So it's, a very busy time of year for 2018. But I just want to thank you so much for joining us, and I hope our listeners will check out the Winter Antique Show over at the Park Avenue Armory. And how long does it last?
It lasts through Sunday, January 28th.
Oh.
So it's a long haul for all of us there at the Armory.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and I will look forward to seeing you this weekend at the fair.
Fabulous. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you.
Okay.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye. And we are back with State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. That was Jane Kallir. We just had a wonderful conversation with her. She is the owner of Galerie St. Etienne, and they are in Midtown on 57th Street. We were talking about Grandma Moses and how she is presenting her snow scenes at the Winter Antique Show, which is at the Park Avenue Armory through January 28th. Now, we're going to hear several different segments that were done on site. I mean, State of the Arts was out there at all these various festivals and fairs. So the first one you're going to hear is the Resistance Revival Choir that performed just before Angela Davis spoke. That was a panel called Gender and Equality, moderated by Terri Lyne Carrington. So let's hear the Resistance Revival Choir first.
Morning with my mind, stay
so that was the Resistance Revival Choir. The reason why the group was formed was they felt that the tradition of singing needs to come back to any type of resistance or activist movement. And so they formed together. These are not professional singers, but the leader is from the production of Fela, and she corralled all these women together to volunteer and to sing and perform. And they have been at Times Square. They're going to be at National Sawdust. They're going to be at the Knitting Factory in Brooklyn. They've been all over and helping all these various organizations bring back the song in the resistance movement. Now we get to hear the first excerpt that was done with Terri Lyne Carrington and Angela Davis.
We have another song, of course, that would be welcomed.
Yes.
All right. So, good afternoon and welcome. We try to create a comfortable and somewhat informal setting so you can feel that you're witnessing a conversation between artists, writers, scholars, but mostly friends, discussing an issue that concerns us deeply. This is an intense time, an awakening on many fronts, and the jazz world is not exempt from this global movement. We're presently part of something incredibly important, and it is my hope that we all feel motivated to challenge ourselves and others to be better as it relates to humanity, as well as this art form. It's also my hope that we can leave here with a renewed sense of responsibility and with resolutions, solutions, and possibly action items so that the future of jazz is better than its past. So, can we be in agreement with that?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to do a brief, and when I say brief, I mean really brief, introduction of everybody, because I think, you know most everybody up here. So just for the formality of it, I'll start to my right. Vijay Iyer is an exciting pianist, composer, and band leader. He is a 2013 MacArthur Fellow and a professor of the arts at Harvard University. In the Department of Music. Arnetta Johnson from Camden, New Jersey. She is a trumpeter, composer, and a graduate of Berklee College of Music. Arnetta has performed with Beyonce, The Roots, Solange, Tia Fuller, who's here, and yours truly, among others. Thank you. Lara Pellegrinelli is a scholar and arts journalist, a long-standing contributor to NPR, and a faculty member here at the New School, right? All right. Angela Davis, who needs no introduction, but... but I'll read this anyway. Is a world-renowned political activist, scholar, and author. She is Distinguished Professor Emerita of History of Consciousness and Feminist Studies at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Esperanza Spalding. She's a groundbreaking composer, bassist, vocalist, 4-time Grammy Award winner, and recently appointed professor of practice at Harvard University, as well as a dear friend and a conscious human. Okay, so, I didn't write myself an introduction for Terri Lyne Carrington. Okay, so there's an underlying topic that I would like for all of us to think about while we have this discussion, and that is considering the role jazz and jazz musicians have played in social justice movements, why have we been so ass backwards with this one in regards to women? Is that all right for you to say ass backwards? Okay. And, you know, I'm open, or we're open, I believe all of us are open to hear anybody that doesn't think it's been that way. All right. Okay, I'd like to start, and how we'll do this is I explain to the panelists. I'll direct some questions to each of us, but we'll, in conversation style, be able to chime in and respond accordingly. And at the very end, if you have some burning questions, we will leave some room for somebody to find you with a microphone so that you can ask away. So I'd like to start with directing something to Angela. Well, first I want to read this quote that I like, an Audre Lorde quote. There is no thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. So maybe it's kind of in two parts, but maybe you can speak to us a little bit about intersectional feminism and how does the theoretical framework of intersectionality advance this conversation, if at all, and also provide us with some historical context to what we're witnessing today, the movement that we're witnessing today.
Okay, you're the timekeeper, so you better tell me. I'm not speaking for a couple of minutes. But, you know, first of all, I just want to say what an honor it is to be here with these amazing musicians and, you know, jazz scholars. And we should all thank Terri Lyne Carrington for organizing this panel and for organizing the tribute concert to Jerry Allen that's happening in the same venue. Thank you, Terri. Well, of course, nothing ever happens in a vacuum. And I think it's really important to recognize that in many ways, all over the world, this is the era of women rising up. We remember this time last year, approximately this time, there was the amazing Women's March. Millions of women all over the world who rose up against the Trump administration. And the message was, when women rise up, the whole world rises up with us. And I think that it's kind of bizarre that in the jazz community that has been so responsible over the decades for major contributions to social justice, you know, for doing civil rights work before the civil rights movement was born. It's kind of amazing that that the jazz community isn't leading the rest of us with respect to issues of patriarchy. And so I was talking to Terri Lyne earlier, and I said, you know, this really puzzles me. You know, why is jazz so? And she said, ass backward. You know, with respect to this issue. But I think that it's important now, and particularly since we're paying tribute to Jerry Allen, who was in the vanguard of this work, who foresaw, who presaged this moment, I think, with the work that she did, you know, especially in establishing the all-female jazz residency in New Jersey, Arnetta. I don't know how far Camden is. Okay, that's good. But the point that I wanted to make was that, let me make 2 points. One point is that if one looks at the history of jazz, one looks at the history of blues music, music, one sees a feminist impulse that was there before the feminist movement actually emerged. When one considers that it was not until the 1960s that there came to be any public recognition at all of issues like domestic violence, sexual assault. These were topics that were being explored in the blues. Look at Ma Rainey, look at Bessie Smith, Billie Holiday, in the very interesting way in which she raised issues that later came to be recognized as pivotal feminist issues. So that's the one point that I want to make. The other point I want to make is that movements, wherever they are located, always create the backdrop for individual action. So sometimes we ask, well, why haven't there been more protests? Just as black people will ask, and I remember in the 50s thinking, why is it that we're putting up with segregation? Why don't we rise up? But the point is that the individuals feel empowered to speak out only in the context of a movement. And our very individuality is created by collective movements. And I think that's where we are now. And this is one of the reasons why we're seeing, the Me Too phenomenon. We're seeing, all of the women who now feel empowered to stand up and speak out. But I do think, as Terri was indicating, that we have to think in intersectional terms. Because if we only think about women, then there's a tendency to assume that the category women is abstract. And when it's abstract, that means it's white. Because we always defer to that kind of clandestinely racialized abstraction. And so when we think about women, we not only have to think about women of color, Black feminism, of course, has been very important in this respect. Immigrant women, transgender women, we have to broaden our category and recognize that this is the moment of the ascendance of women. And certainly within the jazz community, we're beginning to see what will, I think, turn out to be an amazing movement emerge.
That was Angela Davis with Terri Lyne Carrington. There were others who were on the panel, as you heard. They were being introduced. Esperanza Spalding, Laura Pellegrini, I believe that's how you pronounce her last name, and VJ, that is also an amazing artist. So they were all there. Oh, and there was another young sister that was there, Arnett, and they were there talking about how do you embed more women into the jazz scene? How do we actually explore jazz? How do we make it more accessible to people? So I thought that was great. And the Winter Jazz Festival should be commended for what they did. We've been supporting them 2 years in a row, as well as others for Arts NYC, as well as APAP and all the other fairs. Now, you're going to hear a very private interview that was done for APAP. They had me meet Christina Soriano and Christina, believe it or not, two Christinas, Hugenschmidt, and they were talking about their collaborative work, neuroscience and dance, how it will help quality of life of older adults, how it will deal with neuro-degenerative diseases. I did it this time. And so therefore you get to hear and learn what they are doing. I thought it was a great conversation. I am here with Christina Soriano, correct, and Christina Hugenschmidt. and we are here at the Hilton Hotel for the APAP conference, and we're going to be talking with them about something that's very, very interesting and very important, and that is about aging, dance, and quality of life. And they were brought here to the APAP conference for their TransAct conference and the plenary group that will focus on this. Their discussion is called Improvement, an improvement without the E in improvement, talks about how they can work with older adults who might be experiencing neuro-degenerative diseases like Parkinson and Alzheimer's, and through improvisational, thank you, tongue twister, they are able to help them to actually improve their movement and their balance and really their quality of life. So I just want to thank both Christina and Christina. And please tell us, Christina Soriano, briefly how you started to get involved with developing these dances.
So I was fortunate to be part of an early pilot study in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where I live, with a colleague at Winston-Salem State, who is a physical therapist who was interested in measuring changes in mobility and balance for people living with Parkinson's after an intervention of a modern dance class. So I was brought on as the interventionist or the dance teacher, and we taught this class to this small pilot group of people. And that really opened up for me an aha moment, which was, wow, this group of older adults are doing fine in a very beginner level modern dance class. But when I was introducing exercises that invited improvisational responses, there was really exciting changes happening in the way they moved. They felt a lot of agency in that moment of selecting and generating their own way of responding and interpreting what they heard me ask them to do. So that really began for me a moment of, well, we have to keep going with this work, and we have to keep developing how we improvise in this community in the dance studio.
Could you give me an example of some of the terms you might actually offer them as they're engaged in this class?
Yeah, so a prompt that I often give, and it might actually be one I do tomorrow in our quick session, will be something like conduct an orchestra.
Ooh.
So people will begin a gestural arm dance that mimics what they think a conductor looks like. Of course, no one in the room is an orchestra conductor.
Okay.
But they can become one in that moment. And then I might ask them to switch gears and environments entirely and say, now conduct traffic. So you move from one qualitative way of moving to a very different qualitative way of moving. And so by doing that, your body is engaged in a different physicality, right? Now the cognitive piece comes in when I might say something like, okay, can you do them both at the same time? Can you conduct an orchestra and then traffic and then do both simultaneously?
That's really quite fascinating and very creative.
Well, it's fun. It's also really fun. And that is a critical sort of pillar of our work, is that it's joyful. And in a lot of ways, too, there's no wrong way of doing it.
Right. And I was hoping you would say that word eventually.
Yeah.
Joyful.
Joyful, and also the prompts in the class are meant to create a space where it feels safe and there is no judgment that your orchestra conducting is better or worse than hers. And what I've loved about, over time, the class community, people who come regularly week after week, year after year, they will be seated in a chair doing a prompt, responding to a prompt like this, and feel very comfortable to close their eyes and do it. So they're really engaged in that moment. They're not worrying about what they look like compared to someone else, or what they look like in the mirror in the dance studio, for instance.
So now I would like to bring in the other Christina, because
please do.
This is a collaboration. This is a collaboration of dance and neuroscience. And Christina, tell me, how did you feel when you first learned about what Christina Soriano was doing with dance.
Well, I heard Christina speak about her work, and I saw videos of someone who had participated in her Parkinson's study and saw videos of them before and after they completed her dance intervention. And the changes in movement were really astounding. And it was particularly caught my attention because the kind of movement that she does is not repetitive, it's not training, it's not what you would traditionally think of as rehabilitative or exercise training to improve strength or to improve gait, but people's movement quality was changed tremendously. As a neuroscientist, that caught my attention, and I was wondering what was happening in people's brains that would allow them to have such a strong response to the intervention that she had.
Wow. So that's how you met her, and that's what you thought. But tell me, what do you think now about this collaboration that the two of you have? Have you learned a lot? Did it change your, understanding about what you could do as a neuroscience for older adults?
I would say that it's changed my thinking in many ways. I don't know if that it changed what I think I can do as a neuroscientist, but I think it has. In the way of there are two ways I think that it has. One is the way it has started a conversation, I think, at the School of Medicine and in my department. So I'm a researcher, not a physician, but I'm in the Department of Internal Medicine in the section on geriatrics. So all of our work focuses on aging. And I found myself having conversations with people who told me that this was maybe not a fruitful line of research, that it wasn't likely to get funded. But I pointed out to them that virtually every continuing care retirement facility, like an assisted living place, community centers, senior centers, they all offer arts-based programming. They all tout their arts-based programming, but there's basically no research on what the actual effects of that arts-based programming are. And as an aging center studying aging, this was probably more commonly prescribed for our older adults in our community than even medications that commonly prescribed medications. It was more universal, and yet we didn't understand the effects it was having on people's bodies and minds, and that it was very worthy of study from that perspective. It's also been interesting, Christina and I have had some interesting conversations. Another interesting one we've had is about falling. Mm-hmm. So, in geriatrics, falling is huge.
Yeah.
And falls can really be a crisis point for someone's health care. It's often a turning point where people really go downhill, where they begin to need more care. Maybe they can't get back to their home because they fractured a hip, and then they have another problem and another problem and another problem. So falls can be very dangerous. And we have a very clinical and technical definition of falling, which is to unintentionally come to rest on the ground or a lower surface. Right, it makes me laugh too. It's hilarious. But that is what a fall is clinically and in research. But for Christina, as a dancer, falling is something very different. To her, falling is a transfer of weight. Walking is falling. Falling can be done as part of a dance. That's something beautiful and meaningful.
That's true.
And she was talking about falling in her class with her Parkinson's students. And she's had a whole session where they practiced falling, and she said,
I was just thinking that.
Yeah. Well, she said her explanation was they are going to fall.
Yes.
That is part of the disease. So the challenge then is to redefine your relationship with the ground, to realize that you're going to be there, to be comfortable being there, and to know how to get up from it.
Yes.
And I thought...
But that's a part of life.
Exactly. And I thought, what a beautiful perspective to bring into our research and our care for our patients in our geriatrics clinic. This idea that, yes, these things are going to happen. It's not the end of the world. But you don't have to panic. You don't have to freak out. You can just consider that you could redefine your relationship with the ground. You can anticipate that it's going to happen, and then you can think about what you're going to do when it does, instead of having this fearful kind of reaction to it. And I think that's beautiful.
I'm going to have to admit something that I didn't say earlier. I might have implied it, but there's a lot of new funding, at least in New York City, with offering arts-based programs to older adults, but it seemed very gimmicky to me. Just a way of kind of demeaning the arts. That's how I thought. I thought it was a way of demeaning the arts, and you're not really helping people to actually improve their careers, their artistic practice. You're basically just trying to find a way to give someone a job and not even pay them very well for doing it. But from what you're saying is that, and I do believe this, that if you incorporate the arts in everyday life, then it becomes more meaningful. I had a project that I was working on. It was a pretty big project. And we were looking at how ways people use city streets. And one of the ways I said was to bring in dancers to ask them how do they activate the sidewalks when they walk from A to B point. Did they go straight? Did they interact with people? Did they skip or dance around? But nobody wanted to do it. They were afraid to look at that. And what you ladies are telling me is that you're seeing that the arts can be a healing component in people's life that would actually push them towards a quality that they never thought they could have in their life. What do you think?
Well, I think of the people who participate in this class as dancers. And whether or not they identify as dancers, every day, in that hour we're together, they do. And having that community of dancers in a dance studio has also led me, in the spirit and likeness of someone like Liz Lerman, who's also a mentor, to say, why are we also keeping these people only in this community together? And then my undergraduate, healthy, able-bodied, beautiful women only in this community, and then all of the children who participate in arts experiences.
We're segregating them.
Yeah, why aren't we having an experience where we are intergenerationally learning from each other? So I have shifted my ideas to think about the paradigm for arts learning and arts experiences. We privilege so much youth and ability and like the tour de force that dancing is, and I love that. I love watching that. I say past tense, doing that, because I too am getting older, but now I am finding I am much more interested in seeing a dance experience that brings people whose movement looks very different from those people, from those skilled, beautiful dancers. I don't want to stop seeing them, but I really want to see them.
Broaden the narrative.
Yeah. And so now doing this research, so you asked her what she's learned, and I'll tell you what I've learned from her, is this idea that, no, this research has shifted who I am as an artist. So I still identify and practice as a choreographer, and I make work. And I want to make work all the time now with people. So we have casts of dancers in summer ensemble projects that are ages 5 to 86, 26, 30 dancers. Some were men and women along that. Some living with something like Parkinson's. Others have other physical challenges, balance challenges that are developmentally specific. Some are 5-year-old little children who take creative movement classes, and who also, I believe there's something really important that I am helping shape, perhaps, in exposing these children to being around older adults.
Well, it's just that the way we used to live, I mean, nowadays, people don't understand. I lived with my grandmother.
Yes.
I lived with my great-grandmother. How many people can say that today? In one house. I also learned that most young people don't know what it's like to live in a house. So I had an summer exhibition on Governor's Island.
Oh, wow.
And I had the house. I was the first group where we had historic Civil War houses. And they're still dealing with water issues and food issues. So they said we couldn't cater the way we wanted, but they couldn't stop you if you wanted to bring a picnic basket. So one of my artists said, this is a way for us to get around this loophole. And I'm outing myself. So we brought in pies. And I had key lime pie, peach pie, apple pie. Well, first of all, men love pie. So add that to a porch. And now I had over 100 people.
Did you grow up in the South?
My family did. So we had all pies, cookies, cakes. I had interns chopping everything up, artwork in this house, people sitting, artists talking to visitors and invited guests, and everyone's having a ball because they're like, wow. And for kids, they didn't know what it was like to be in a house, to climb up and down the stairs. If you could see how babies look at stairs and try to figure out, now how do I get to the top of that stairwell? It's funny, it's hilarious what they do to get up those stairs. So what you're saying is we're missing that in our society, this sort of intergenerational.
Well, here's what I think. I think that we have to be teachers and leaders in this moment. It can't just be about serving only older adults. So I have to think about my students as future Congress people or future doctors. I have to think about the younger children in the room and the influences and inspirations that might come from these experiences as shaping the direction of how we treat older adults going forward in our lives.
But all of us. I think it's not so much older adults, about life.
Yes.
And that aging is a part of life.
Totally. But I think that, you said earlier this idea about artists solving problems. And so I know in her department of geriatrics and gerontology there is a problem. There's not enough support and research and really answers to how we age well.
Well, I wanted to go back to Christina because I think I know what part of it might be, but they might get you in a lot of trouble. The point is, I feel that we've become too reliant on pills. A pill to miraculously solve an ailment, but then it brings another side effect. I listen on TV how they're pushing all these pills and they say, okay, but the side effects might be shortness of breath, dementia, heart attacks. And I'm saying, well, the side effects are worse than the original disease. So, but the point is you're so busy trying to fix one thing, but it causes this problem where you're ending up taking nothing but pills. To me, after a while, that becomes toxic.
You won't get me in trouble at all. In fact, so the ethos, one thing that's interesting that people often, and I didn't really understand until I began in my department where I am, geriatrics is a specialty like pediatrics. And the word geriatrics actually we all hate. It's a very antiquated word, and it is sort of in our society sort of derogatory. Nevertheless, it's still the name of the field. But it's similar to pediatrics. There's specialized knowledge that you need to care for people over 65 because our bodies change. In the same way that, actually one analogy that I've used in the past, we had a friend who had a child that had hand-foot-mouth virus, which is terribly common in young children. You take your kid into the pediatrics office, they don't bat an eyelash, and they say, I'm really sorry, your kid's going to be miserable for about 5 days, but you just have to go home and deal with it. Well, this happened to them on a weekend. They went into an urgent care. The doctor there was not a pediatrician. Even though this is very common in younger children, that doctor didn't know that because they weren't a pediatrician. Did all this crazy testing and things. They get to their pediatrician on Monday, and the pediatrician's like, oh, super common virus, go home, wait 5 days. But similar things happen in aging. So our doctors who specialize in aging are constantly trying to take people off their medications because they are on too many. And quite often, your regular primary care doctor doesn't have the specialized knowledge about some of the drug interactions, the way they interact with aging, even common things like there are common allergy medicines that are anticholinergic. So this is a neurotransmitter system that is, for instance, affected in dementia. If you have someone who's having memory problems, you don't want them on a lot of those medications. But often primary care doctors don't know that. So there really is a specialized knowledge to aging medicine that has exactly the ethos that you're talking about. Part of the reason that we were able to get the grant funding we got is there is in aging an ethos of trying to do behavioral and non-pharmacological interventions because your system is a little more delicate. You don't want to overwhelm it. You don't want people on 20,000 medications. It ruins your quality of life.
It does. Oh, my God. This was very interesting. I learned something. I wasn't quite sure what direction the conference was going with some of these topics, but this has been very enlightening, and it's a very powerful sort of presentation that you're going to get, and I hope people ask more questions because I really do see it as being useful. We're not looking at quality of life. We're just looking at the quantity of life, how long we can live, how we can endure, how much we can bear, but not really about quality of life. And there are many ways that you can expand your life, the definition of your life. As a dancer, even as an older person, if we are more receptive of broadening versus narrowing the narratives.
There's one thing I'd actually like to go back to. I'm sorry. When you were asking Christina about the arts practice, we feel this is a very important point. So when she was talking about her intergenerational dancers, these are paid performers. So she writes grants.
Wow.
She does the choreography. This is a public performance that's part of a larger arts festival, and the dancers are paid. The 80-year-olds are paid, the college students are paid, the professional dancers are paid. So to me, that's really important because we get a lot of questions about what we're doing as being therapy, and what we are doing is not therapy. And I think Christina will tell you she is an MFA, she is not a therapist. And there very much is a role for art therapy, different kinds of art therapy, music therapy, dance therapy, and those are therapies. But what we are investigating is the idea that incorporating a routine arts practice as part of your life in the same way that you might have an exercise practice or a religious practice or a spiritual practice, that having an arts practice is an important aspect of your life that can improve your quality of life. Part of the reason that we're interested in looking at it scientifically I do joke around that I take all her beautiful work and I put it into an Excel spreadsheet and make it unbeautiful. But part of my motivation for doing that is I feel that there are certain people that can look at something as beautiful as what she does and still not see it, and not see the importance and not see the worth.
Wow.
And if I can take that and put it into a format that they can understand, maybe all they understand is numbers and statistics, and you did better on X, Y, and Z. If I can take her beautiful work and put it into that language to reach a new audience, to maybe help improve funding, to help improve access to people and communities, because now there's a quote-unquote justification for it, then I would like to have a piece of that and to do my part to further that work. But it's very much this idea of furthering an arts practice, not creating a kind of therapy.
Thank you for adding that. You really crystallized everything, because when it comes to arts funding, when it comes to arts funding, it is about that, understanding what some people with narrow views have. So this was a real pleasure getting to know both of you.
Yeah. Thank you. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much. And we are back. Now, that was a great conversation. We learned a lot. This is really relevant for all of our listeners. We're all aging, and how do we still have a meaningful quality of life? So with that, we're about to wrap up our show. I just want to give a shout out for tomorrow. Tomorrow is marking the first year anniversary of Donald Trump, and there's a group called We Are the Federation, led by Laurie Anderson, who's been on our show and on WBAI before. There's going to be a women's march tomorrow. There's going to be on the steps of the New York Public Library a reading of different literary artists to talk about how do we socially engage, how do we deal with activism, how do we improve our quality of life. So thank you, everyone, for a great show. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
On Saturday, January 27th, from 3 to 7 p.m., join the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee and the National Alumni Association of the Black Panther Party at the 22nd Annual Dinner Tribute to Us Held Political Prisoners and Their Families. This year, we are also honoring those who spread the word. Thank you, Naya Ardini, Basir Mchawi, Sally O'Brien, and Goma Hill, Salawazi Afi Olosulu for your work. That's Saturday, January 27th, from 3 to 7 p.m. at the Unitarian Church of All Souls, 1157 Lexington Avenue and 80th Street in Manhattan. For information and reservations, call 718-512-5008 or email mxcc519@verizon.net. All proceeds go to the commissary of our imprisoned freedom fighters.
On Sunday, January 21st at 11 p.m., Sugar in My Bowl prepares for the Grammy Awards by featuring composer, vocalist, and nominee for Best Jazz Vocal Album, A Social Call, Jasmia Horn. Join us as we spend time with this very original artist. That's Sunday, January 21st at 11 p.m., right here on WBAI New York, 99.5 FM, and wbai.org on the web.